So yesterday, as I was going off the air early in Matt's show, the SEC announced that they were going to go to 9-game schedule. This was always inevitable. Why? Because we always have to follow the money. And when programs and athletic departments are going to have to share $20 million with their athletes, and that number is going to increase over time, they have to find more revenue. Where's the easiest place to find more revenue? TV. What does TV want? Good football. What does 9 games get you? Good football. So this was always going to happen. It was never not going to happen. You're going to have to get some of the Kentuckys and Mississippi States on board to make sure they were okay trying to make a bowl game with 9 league games. And then you're going to have the teams at the top of the league who are fighting for championships suggest that, hey, maybe this is not the best idea if we're trying to win. But ultimately, money's going to win. And money has won, and the SEC will go to 9 games. Herb Vincent, Director of Communications over the Southeastern Conference, was with Jacob Hester and Matt Flynn this morning on Off the Bench and started talking about the process that went on to get to this point with the SEC. And so the first question and the first comment that Herb makes here is the timeline of the decision to make this 9 games a reality.
We had discussions about our schedule even going back to 2019 before Oklahoma and Texas even joined the league. I can remember there was a meeting scheduled in 2020. That's when COVID hit and that discussion never took place. And so then Oklahoma and Texas joined the league, and I think there's a natural progression that when a conference expands, you talk about adding games to the schedule. But the initial discussion about adjusting our schedule emanated from talk about wanting our student athletes and our fans to be able to see more teams from around the league. In the old divisional days, you only saw a couple of other teams from other divisions, rarely, because they did not rotate through your schedule very often. Bringing it up to this year's spring meetings, I think we had some healthy discussions there, a lot of discussions between the ADs themselves, separately with football coaches, together football coaches and athletics directors, and then conversations just continued after that. So I think it was an important announcement yesterday. I think it was a look to the future for our athletics directors and our presidents and chancellors, and I think it's good for SEC fans.
So that's the conference's thought on that, and I don't have a huge disagreement with it. What everyone now wants to know is, okay, you're telling me there's 3 permanents. Who's making that call, and how are you doing it? And this goes back to the scheduling thing when Oklahoma and Texas came in. I would once again rather be a fly on the wall for that discussion and that determination than I would if you gave me a ticket to Georgia, Texas this year on the 50-yard line. Like, I want to hear this discussion. And Herb talked about how they're going to go about figuring out 3 permanent opponents for all 16 teams.
Some of it has to do with rivalries, and part of this structure, which is 3 annual opponents, 6 rotating opponents, was to maintain some of those traditional rivalries. I think people know who those rivalries are. Then there's, you have schedule balance as much as you can. You don't want to load up one team with too many difficult annual rivals. There's geography involved. I think there's a number of different things, and so that'll play out as we go through it. And certainly there's discussions with the schools as well.
I love this because it gives me a mental image, and it's vivid, of the folks sitting in this room going, okay, we know Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Mississippi State stink, and we know Bama and Georgia and Texas are good, and we know, like, Missouri's hit and miss, and we know Tennessee's kind of hit and miss, but LSU and Auburn are good, and A&M's usually pretty good. Like, you have to literally say that out loud. When you talk about the Major League Baseball schedule, you're just scheduling everybody based on parameters of you have to play your division this many times, you have to play the teams in your league that aren't in your division this many times, and the teams that are in the other league this many times. When you're in the NFL, well, you play your division twice, and you play this division from the NFC, and you play this division from the AFC, and then you play the other teams that finished on your plane. So there's a set parameter. This is just a perception of how good programs are. So you realize that if you put Alabama on somebody's schedule, you're probably going to have to come back with Kentucky or Vanderbilt. And I think that's hilarious because you have to admit that. And it's not every year that every team falls into its usual box. But most years they do. So that part is funny to me. And so we know that LSU was rumored, leaked, discussed to be saddled with Bama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M as their 3 permanent opponents. That was what was being leaked before we got into the Oklahoma, Texas thing, and then we got into not agreeing on 8 or 9 games, and we settled on 8 for the next 2 years, and all that kind of stuff happened. But it was Bama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, and Herb kind of shot that down.
After the announcement yesterday, everybody's guessing who's it going to be. It's going to be the same as the ones that were announced in 2022. Well, there never were any announced in 2022. There was some discussion internally about who it might be, and that discussion kind of took off, and a lot of people guessed at what they were. And so you can search the internet and find all kinds of people who reported different scenarios, but none of that holds right now. And so that'll be a big announcement when we have it, obviously, because the anticipation is already building.
And look, you understand that's a huge, huge deal. Schedule is a massive thing in college football. Hester and Flynn and I can argue about it until the cows come home. Hester wants to play Florida and Bama and Auburn and Texas A&M and Tennessee. I want to play Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and Kentucky and Arkansas and Missouri. That's how we're wired. That's how we're programmed. My team is absolutely 100% going to compete for more championships than his. He's going to make more memories and fill more stadiums. If that's what you're in it for, great. I'm in it to win. So that's the way that I want to see it shake out. Clearly, LSU's not going to get Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. Nobody is. They're going to split it based on what Herb is saying. But I think it's fascinating. So the question is, what rivalries take precedent over others? Because there are some that are either geographical in nature or so burned into the fabric of the conference that they're not willing to push away from them. And the question is, does it matter what happened in 1968? Does it matter what happened in 2018? Like, what are we talking about? And Herb mentioned, whether it's recent or traditional.
I think you make it more recent. You have some recency to it to make sure that you're measuring the strength of programs in a more recent time frame. And one of the things we're not calling it is permanent opponents, because we'll take a certain time period and then relook at it. And those annual rivals could change over the course of time. But we'll look at it, and we'll have a big announcement at some point, and I think people will take interest in it.
People are certainly going to take interest in it because it's a huge, huge deal. Now, it's not the end-all, be-all. Because keep in mind, just because you get X, Y, and Z as permanent opponents, that doesn't mean you're not playing the other teams. That's not your whole schedule. You're still going to play every team in the league over a 2-year run. You're going to visit every team in the league over a 4-year run. So just because LSU is not going to get Georgia as a permanent, LSU and Georgia aren't going to be a permanent opponent. They're not. Because LSU has too strong a ties to other powers in the conference. Bama, certainly. Florida, certainly. Auburn, certainly. Texas A&M, certainly. So I can say with confidence, LSU's not going to get Georgia. Georgia's got too deep a ties with Auburn. They got too deep a ties with Florida. Like, that's how those are going to go. So I'll just use Georgia as an example. Just because Georgia's not in your permanent, you're going to play them every other year. So it's not that big a deal. It is a big deal, but it's not the end-all, be-all. If you were determining what 8 teams you were going to play every single year, that would be a big deal. If you were determining, like, the COVID year, we had that SEC Network reveal where you were adding 2 league games. LSU got Missouri and Vanderbilt, by the way. They lost to Missouri. But that's a big deal because it's 1 year, here's what we're doing. This is an annual thing that's going to roll over. And Herb says we're going to evaluate things every so often to make sure that we don't get completely out of whack. So I'm fascinated by it. You understand my feeling in it. I'm okay with going to 9 games. The playoff's going to get expanded, and we're going to get to a point, as we all know, where LSU is not going to play nickels anymore. Like, we're going to get there. We're not there yet. And the SEC is still going to have 2 free games. You're going to have your 9 league games, then your 1 Power 4 non-conference game. Then you'll have 2 freebie games, and you'll beat them by 70. But I'm just endlessly fascinated by how they're going to separate this out with the 3 permanents. I think there's a reasonable chance. We already know that it's Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Alabama, and I think that's a reasonable draw for LSU. If you just sit here and try to evaluate it on its face, A&M has never figured it out. They're just a better-than-average program. Ole Miss is limited in the resources that they have. They're pretty good right now, or they have been the last 4 years. Will they be this year? We'll see. But over the course of the next 10, okay, they're probably top half of the league, right there with A&M. And then Bama has been a power, but they've got a new coach now, and that can go away. Do they have Urban Meyer taking over for Spurrier, or do they have Ron Zook right now? I don't know. But I think that those three is a reasonable draw. You don't have two superpowers. It's not getting one over easy on the SEC by having Mississippi State and Vanderbilt every year. I think it's reasonable. And I have plenty of dislike for all three of those programs, so that checks out as well. But if you're asking me, I'm not going to suggest that LSU gets Florida, Alabama, and Auburn as permanents. I think that is banging your head against a wall like a goofball. I won't be doing that. I'll take a little bit of an easier route. Thank you. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.